Hey everybody. So you recall in the last video I think that I determined that most of these parts were essentially junk and I was going to need to replace them. And I went to the local plastic suppliers. I had them turn a disc for me, and I also picked up a piece of scrap acrylic sheet, which is about a 1/4 inch wide. I've already chopped it up so I can't quite show you. But what I started doing was to replace some of these parts with the acrylic, but did it a little better. So I cut some new engines, and these are just about exactly 1/4 inch thick, which is awful handy. Right down there. And I'll just cover these right now for the moment because there is something I also did with them. That was to extend the lines down here, see where they meet, and I took one, cut that nice and long, which goes from the one side of the hull up to the opposite side of the nacelle, and I'm not going to be able to hold this too well. I measured out the angle and beveled the second pylon to meet up there in the middle. So this one's a little too long right now, but this is going to work out really well. Once I fuse these together, there's not going to be any stopping them. So up here on the neck and pylon, I did those as two pieces initially. So I went and yet again cut them as two pieces. And yet again, this pylon is a 1/4 inch thick, relative scale, and this pylon is 3/4 of an inch thick, relative scale. You can probably see that I cut the main central one to the proper width, and then while I was about to cut the second and third, I figured I should make them a little smaller, so that way I could get a bevel sort of effect around the edges and it wouldn't just be one big square piece of chunky neck, but more characteristic of a Starfleet neck where you got a bit of a scoop. So the idea here is to fill in all this area. As I was looking at these two parts, I realized that I should probably glue this one on, and then I realized that if it's even half a degree off of angle, it's going to perpetuate itself throughout the design process. So all of a sudden these two are scrap, and I cut this new one. So this time I traced one huge shape, cut that as my central one, and being clear that's not going to totally show up, I guess, unless I can get it to highlight in some places. And then again on the sides I cut them a little thinner so I could get the bevel going on. And I think that's going to work out pretty well. So right now this shape goes halfway into a nacelle and halfway down into the secondary hull. What I'm going to do is cut the two outer pieces right along this level so they act as a shelf, and in the disc I'll cut one huge chunk coming out straight through there. And let's pull the disc out. So this one was no good because it was too raggedy around the edges, but it was the right concept. And whereas this neck fits in here, sorry for the swinging, pretty much perfectly, this new neck is a little loose, and that's because it's not as imperfect as this one. However, it is the right idea. And of course up on top here, this was just too thick overall. So the idea on the next neck is to do a single 1/4 inch slice coming all the way through here, and where is it? And then just slot this in, and the dish should rest exactly on those blue lines right there. And without further ado, here is the new disc. There's two bad things about it. One, it's exactly 1/16 too thick. So up here you'll see I've measured 7/16, and this is a full 8/16 or 1/2 inch. Regrettable, but awful close. The other bad thing, which is much worse, is the bevel. So you might be able to see that it comes straight down and then kind of angles out and away down to the bottom here. The top and the bottom are the right distance, but this edge along the bevel here, let's get this centered a little better in the screen, is unfortunately too sharp and then too smooth and then too rounded. I don't know if I'm going to be able to smooth this off. The company that I got this from only does particular kinds of bevels, and even though the guy at the desk said he was going to talk to the manufacturers out back, it didn't translate exactly. This isn't a bad thing. I mean, it kind of has its own little bit of grace. However, it is not a single straight bevel line like that. So I don't know if I'll be able to turn this and maybe do a file on it and get it straightened out, or if I'll be able to beef up the bottom and get that straight. Well, that won't work because there's still this probably almost 1/4 inch straight line straight down. So I really need to shave off exactly a straight line. It did give me a center point, which is nice, and I nailed in a piece of brass here for that. Let me get this back on, that's important. My initial idea was to create some ribs and then lay them out in this pattern and then fill them in with styrene. Well, I've got Sculpey on hand, so what I've done is a sculpting technique and just created a negative mold, and I've started swirling this around with the Sculpey. Obviously this is totally primitive at this point. This is just 2 passes so far. It's off center, it's grody, pretty messed up. So you can see how off center it is right there just doing this. However, the idea is sound, and what I'm going to be doing is sanding this down, building it up, sanding it down until it's a really nice shape, more similar to this. Also, in measuring the top out, it turns out, even though it doesn't look like it, this bottom scoop is identical to the top. So in this case, all I need to do is get one right, and then I've got both. And having that center hole is definitely helpful. And get a profile shot here maybe. So yeah, obviously it's not adequate at this point. However, this is essentially a first draft. The only other major part that's going to cause me, well, there's 2 other parts I guess that are going to cause me trouble. That's the secondary hull here, which I've done some more measuring. Turns out this antenna point comes out straightly to the flat end of the flight deck, which is convenient. And then this end here is exactly the same height as this one here. So there's some duplications I can get going on, which will be definitely helpful. And we'll see where those go. And of course the engines. If I sell this as a kit, then obviously I can't use the original engines. I have to create my own. And I've got a few ideas on that. It looks like I'll have to get a lathe, and that could be maybe $200 something for a little cheap one, unfortunately. For this shape though, I don't know that I can lathe it. However, I have seen people that have lathed it, but it's a really complicated process because it's off-centered. So what I'm going to be doing for a first draft on this, or perhaps a second draft if you count this as the first draft, is create some ribs and start building those up. Getting them all centered and stuff is going to be the trick there, but it should work out. And that's pretty much it, I suppose. I got these cool acrylic spheres here to act as the buzzards, which are going to be good. And it's a matter of replacing all these other little fiddly bits, but I think I've got that covered. So that's it for an update on this. This neck piece is really good, and that was a critical component. it'll just be a matter of attaching all this together now and getting that working out, cutting a 1/4 inch slice into this. I guess a buzzsaw will do that. It's just going to be a very delicate procedure, and making sure that I get it exactly a 1/4 inch. A little more, a little less isn't going to be adequate in this case. And that's it. Thanks for watching.